say I'm not a huge fan of the Mythica series as a whole so far. I have liked a lot of the Arrowstorm stuff. I feel their strongest film to date is the Saga film, which is also a fantasy film, and I kind of wish they had continued that one on. But this film, well, this Mythica series is obviously planned as a series of films, and I don't know how successful they've been, to be honest. But to me, the Mythica films compared to, say, Saga or Orc Wars just seem very lackluster to me. They just seem so generic. And all three of them, to this point, I feel have the same problems. The story here is interesting as well, I would say, because it really feels like a side quest to the main mission of a role-playing game. So if you can imagine the Mythica series as a role-playing game, this film is basically a side quest that really doesn't have anything to do with the kind of the main plot. And there is a bit of tie-in towards the end, but that feels quite tacked on to me, I have to say. So the story here, basically, our heroes basically are sent on a mission when one of their friends is captured by, kind of an old enemy, basically, and they're kind of sent on a mission to retrieve something that will, in exchange for his life. And that's basically your adventure. And like I said, it does tie in a little bit to the main sort of mythology, but there you go. The comparisons to me are easy to make with this film, or this series, is really with Star Wars. You have this dark NECROMANCER, basically, who is essentially the Sith of this series, and he's all dark and oppressive and all of that. And you have our group of heroes who are the kind of the good guys, and their kind of the central character is kind of flirting with the dark side, if you like. So it really is a kind of a low budget fantasy Star Wars in a lot of ways. The main issue I have with this series, and unfortunately this film is exactly the same in regards to some of the issues I have with it, is that to me, we're 3 films into this and all the characters still seem such generic archetypes, really. There's no kind of layers to them. No nuances to any of these characters. They feel so just run-of-the-mill generic fantasy types, all of whom have got a particular personality type, and that is it. They only kind of really stick to this one personality type. We've kind of got the rogue elf guy, we've kind of got this serious cleric woman, all that sort of thing, and there's no real kind of, there's some forced romance in here, but I have to say the characters are such stereotypes. There's no real depth to it. And I mentioned the movie Saga. I felt in one movie that film had better characterization than this film has. This series of films has so far. With 3 films, they still have better characterization than this series. That's not to say there aren't some kind of good things here. I have to say this introduces a new character who I quite liked, and possibly was the kind of the most nuanced out of all of them, Battilla. And he's just kind of like this, essentially a bad guy who ends up kind of going on their quest with them. Although he has precious little screen time, I kind of would have liked to have seen his character maybe expanded upon in this film. And they did the same thing with the second film. They introduced a new character, and he was kind of character was cut short as well. So they're kind of like cutting away all the kind of the more interesting characters and sticking their quite frankly boring generic archetype leads, unfortunately. So there you go, a bit of a shame. You do have Kevin Sorbo turn up for kind of an extended action sequences in this film, and this one actually shies a little bit away from the kind of the CGI monsters that we've seen. So you do get a somewhat more grounded look on the kind of in regards to the effects. There's plenty of kind of soldiers or battles and stuff like that, but we do have some kind of like undead type show up, and there's these kind of demons that live in this mountain. And I have to say, I did quite like the effects, and they were done quite well, actually. The director here likes to use slow-mo a lot, I have to say, so it is kind of noticeable. The action shots, every one pretty much has, will have a few slow-mo shots in it, and it's like, I think that effect can look quite good, but when it's overdone and you start noticing that's when it becomes a problem for me. There are some good location shooting here, and I quite like some of the aesthetics, the armour and that kind of stuff, but it just feels so kind of just generic and kind of just, you can imagine a bunch of cosplayers kind of doing this, and some of the acting as well, or maybe it's the kind of the direction that they're given here. Like, for example, and I'm going to be doing acting myself now, we have someone turn up and they've got a hangover, and they really oversell it by going, oh, and rubbing their head. It's just so kind of, and that's just one example of what I mean. The kind of the way it's just so hits you over the head with like this person's doing this person's a good guy, this person's a bad guy, so he's got to be real obvious about it. And there's no layers. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more sophistication as the series goes on. It does feel like a TV series at this point, and I feel the story is getting dragged. I don't think it needs to be told over 5 films. So I've got to say, this movie, unfortunately, this movie series continues to be somewhat laborious. It's not that some of its kind of redeeming features. Like I said, I think aesthetically, if you're a fantasy fan, there's a bit to enjoy here, and some of the kind of the guest characters, I suppose you would call them, are a bit more interesting than maybe some of the new characters. Obviously, there's 2 more films to go in this series, so we'll see how those one does. I believe the next film is by a different director again, so we'll see what they can bring to the table. But overall, this film is pretty lackluster. It's it's an okay film for just a generic fantasy film, and that's such. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. So pretty much an average movie for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.